Hi everyone, welcome to Talk Easy. Today, Catherine and Mike will clear up the difference between the past simple and present perfect. Learn when to say, I saw the movie versus I have seen the movie. Let's get started.
All right, everyone, get ready. Today, we're gonna dive deep into some English grammar. I know grammar. Not always the most exciting thing. But stick with us. Today, we're tackling the past simple and present perfect tenses.
Oh, yeah.
And honestly, they can be a bit tricky, but by the end of this deep dive,
It's true.
I promise you'll be able to use them like a pro.
Yeah.
And you'll really understand how to add that extra polish to your English.
Absolutely.
It's all about clear communication.
Right.
Have you ever wondered, sometimes you say I saw, and other times you say I have seen.
It's a head scratcher for sure.
We're going to unlock that mystery today.
We're going to decode those tricky tenses.
Absolutely. So to get us started, let's break down the past simple first.
Okay.
Can you give us a kind of a simple explanation of what that tense is all about?
Yeah, so think of the past simple as a way to talk about something that happened and is done, finished, over.
Okay.
Complete. And it happened at a specific time in the past.
Gotcha.
Sometimes you'll actually say when it happened,
Right.
like yesterday or last week or in 2015.
Okay.
But sometimes the context makes it clear that we're talking about a finished time period, like if you're telling a story about your childhood or something.
So if I said, I walked the dog this morning, that would be past simple.
Exactly. You finished walking the dog,
Right.
and this morning is a specific time in the past.
Perfect. Okay,
Yeah.
that makes sense. But I know from personal experience
Oh, yeah.
that the past simple can trip people up sometimes.
It definitely can.
What are some of the common mistakes that you see people make with this tense?
Oh, there are a few. I'd say one really common one is forgetting the ed ending for regular verbs. Like instead of I watch, people might accidentally say I watched TV last night.
Oh, I've totally done that. It's like,
We all have.
yeah, like your brain just kind of skips over.
Well, you know what you mean, but the gremlins get in the way.
They do. So what other pitfalls should we watch out for?
Let me think. I think messing up irregular verbs is a big one.
Okay.
These are those verbs that don't follow the normal rules for the past tense, like go becomes went,
Right.
and eat becomes ate.
Irregular verbs, gotta love them.
They're a challenge, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But once you get the hang of them, it's smooth sailing.
All right, so we've covered past simple. Now let's move on to its more complicated friend, the present perfect.
Done. The present perfect.
This one seems to really throw people off.
It does. It's got a bit of a reputation for being tricky.
So why do you think that is? What makes this tense so hard to grasp?
I think it's because it's not just about the past.
Okay.
It's about how the past connects to right now, the present moment. It gets a little timey-wimey.
I see. So it's like a bridge between then and now.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah. Four actions that happen, but we don't know exactly when or the exact time just isn't the important part. It's more about the fact that it happened at all.
Okay. So if I say I've been to Disneyland, I'm not necessarily saying when I went, just that I've had that experience at some point in my life.
Exactly. The focus is on the experience. You've been to Disneyland, and that's part of your story now.
Okay. That makes sense. Now, what about a sentence like he's finished his homework? We don't know when he finished it.
Right.
But the point is that it's done, right?
Exactly. It's done, and that matters now. Maybe he wants to go out and play or something.
Yeah. And I've noticed that certain little words, like for or since, they often show up when we're using the present perfect.
They're like little clues.
Yeah. So is there a connection there?
Absolutely. Those little words are called time expressions,
Okay.
and they can be super helpful in figuring out which tense to use. If you see last year or at 5 p.m., that's usually a sign that we're talking about the past simple, a specific time in the past. But if you see for 3 weeks or since 2020,
Okay.
that's usually a hint that we're dealing with the present perfect.
It's like they're little signposts pointing us in the right direction.
Exactly.
I like that. So now to really get this difference clear in our heads,
Right.
can you break down that key difference? Talking about a specific event versus talking about like an experience.
Absolutely. So think of it this way. The past simple is like a snapshot. You're
Ah.
capturing a single moment in time.
Okay.
Like, I graduated in 2018. Boom, there's the picture. Done.
Okay.
But the present perfect is more like a photo album.
Okay.
It's showing how all those past experiences have shaped who you are now. Like, I've graduated.
I get
It's still a part of you. It's still relevant to who you are today.
Gotcha. So past simple, one photo, present perfect, the whole album.
Yeah, that's a great way to visualize it. And that's why we often use the present perfect for actions that started in the past and are still going on right now.
Okay.
You know, like, I have lived in New York for 10 years. You started living there in the past and you're still there now.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so let's say I'm trying to figure out which tense to use. Are there any practical tips or questions that I can ask myself to help me choose the right one?
Absolutely. It can be a little tricky sometimes, right?
It can be, yeah.
But here's what I do. First, I ask myself, is the action over? Is it completely finished?
Okay.
If it is, then I think, okay, do I know exactly when it happened? If I do, then I go with past simple.
Okay.
But if I don't know when it happened, or the time just isn't important, and the action still has something to do with the present, then I usually go with present perfect.
That's a really useful framework. I like that a lot. But even with these guidelines, I know there are some tricky situations, like where people still make mistakes,
Oh, for sure.
even if they understand the basic idea.
Yeah, the grammar gremlins can be sneaky.
They can. So can you walk us through some of the common mistakes that people make even when they get the basic difference?
Sure, let's do it. It's not just about knowing the rules, but also about avoiding those common pitfalls.
Right, right.
So one common mistake is using the past simple and the present perfect together in a way that just doesn't work. Like saying, I have seen him yesterday.
Okay.
Now, yesterday tells us that we're talking about a specific time in the past.
Right.
So we need to use the past simple, I saw him yesterday.
Okay. Okay. So mixing those time signals can really mess things up.
It's like speaking two different languages at the same time.
Gotcha. So what's another mistake to watch out for?
Another common one is using the present perfect with a specific time marker. It's like trying to fit a square peg in a round hole.
Right.
For instance, you can't say, I have finished my work 2 hours ago,
Right.
because 2 hours ago is a specific time in the past. So we need the past simple. I finished my work 2 hours ago.
So even if it feels like finishing the work is still relevant to now,
Yeah,
if we can pin it down to a specific time,
right.
we got to go with past simple.
Exactly. The time marker wins in that case.
Gotcha. All right, what's the third mistake on our list?
The third one can be a little sneaky.
Yeah.
It's forgetting to use the present perfect when you actually need it.
Okay.
And this often happens when people are so focused on the recent past that they forget about the connection to the present. Like someone might say, I saw her this morning, which might be grammatically correct.
Yeah.
But if it's still the same day, it's more natural to say, I've seen her today, because today is not over yet.
So it's all about that connection to the present moment.
Exactly. It's like a little time travel trick.
This is really helpful. I feel like we're starting to get a handle on these tricky tenses.
Me too. It's like we're cracking the code.
And, by breaking down these mistakes and really understanding why people make them, I think it'll really help us avoid them in the future.
I agree. It's like having a grammar superpower.
I like it. I like it.
Yeah.
So we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive, but I have a feeling we're just getting started.
Oh, yeah. We've only scratched the surface. There's so much more to explore.
I'm excited to keep digging deeper.
Me too. It's really amazing, how much depth there is to these tenses. It's like peeling back the layers of an onion. There's always more to uncover.
I love that. And speaking of uncovering layers, let's dive into some more, some of the finer points, some more subtle ways that we use these tenses.
Okay.
One thing that I've noticed that trips people up is how we use the present perfect to talk about like experiences,
Right.
even when we don't actually mention when they happened.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that a little bit? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so sometimes we're not really focused on like the specific details of when something happened. It's more about, whether someone's had a certain experience.
Okay.
Like let's say someone asks you, have you ever been to Paris? They're not really asking you when you went to Paris. They just want to know if you've ever been there at all.
So I might say, yes, I've been to Paris.
Exactly.
Even if I don't remember what year it was or anything like that.
Yeah, it's about the experience, not the timeline.
Okay.
Mm.
That makes sense. Now what if someone asks, did you go to Paris last year?
Ah, good question.
Now they are asking about a specific time.
They are. Now we're getting specific.
So would we use past simple then?
You got it. You would say, no, I didn't go to Paris last year, or yes, I went to Paris last year, depending on whether or not you actually went.
It's all about how the question is phrased, isn't it?
It is. The question sets up the tense. It's like a little grammar game.
I like that. All right, so let's talk about for and since with the present perfect. These words, they cause so much confusion.
They do. They're tiny but mighty.
They really are. Can you help us kind of unravel how they work with this tense?
I can try. So, you know how we said the present perfect connects the past to the present?
Yeah.
Well, for and since are like little helpers that give us more information about that connection.
Okay.
For tells us how long something has been happening. It's about duration. Like, I've lived in London for 5 years.
Okay, so for is about the length of time.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
And then since tells us when something started.
Okay.
Like, I've lived in London since 2019.
So for is about the length of the experience.
Right.
And since is about when it began.
You got it.
Okay.
It's all about pinpointing that starting point.
Okay, that's really helpful. Now sometimes we use the present perfect and we don't use like for or since at all.
We do. Sometimes we leave them out.
When does that happen?
Well, sometimes the focus is really on the result of an action. You know, what happened because of something in the past.
Okay.
Or how that past action is still affecting us now.
Okay.
Like, imagine you say, I've lost my keys.
Uh-oh.
Right?
Yeah.
The important thing is that you don't have your keys now,
Right.
not necessarily when you lost them.
It's about the present consequences.
Exactly. So, you know, we don't need for or since in that case. The present perfect is doing the job all on its own.
Okay, I'm following you. So it's really all about, like the nuance, right?
It is. It's subtle but important.
Yeah, it's about the emphasis.
Yeah.
What we're trying to communicate. This is really fascinating. Like we're like getting a glimpse into how language really works.
It is fascinating, isn't it? I love how these little grammatical choices can really change the meaning.
They really can. And it's making me think about all the times I've probably, misused these tenses without even realizing it.
Oh, I'm sure we all have. I know I have. But that's part of the fun of learning a language. You know, there's always more to discover.
Absolutely. So let's revisit those common mistakes that we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
But this time, let's really dig deeper and try to understand why people make these mistakes.
Okay.
I think getting into the thought process behind the mistakes might help us avoid them in the future.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. You know, sometimes just understanding the why can make all the difference.
Okay, so let's start with that first mistake, the one where people kind of mix up the past simple and present perfect. Why do you think that happens?
Well, you know, I think sometimes people get so caught up in the feeling of something being recent
Okay.
that they automatically reach for the present perfect,
Okay.
even when they're actually talking about a specific time in the past.
So like in that example, I have seen him yesterday.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like they're thinking, oh, I just saw him.
Right.
So it feels present in their mind.
Yeah, it's like they're emphasizing the recency of the action.
Right.
But they're forgetting that yesterday is a clear signal for past simple.
Yeah. It's like those specific time markers, they're like grammar bosses. They're in charge.
They are. They're the ones calling the shots.
They lay down the law. All right, so what about that second mistake where people use the present perfect with a specific time marker? What's going on there?
I think that one comes from not quite grasping the main idea of the present perfect.
Okay.
Remember, it's all about how the past connects to the present.
Right.
But when you use a specific time marker,
Yeah.
you're kind of shifting the focus away from the present and back to the past.
Right.
And that's where the past simple comes in.
So even if the action happened really recently,
Yeah.
like I finished my homework 2 hours ago,
Right.
the fact that we know exactly when it happened means we got to stick with past simple.
Exactly. It's like the time marker is saying, hey, this is past simple territory. No present perfect allowed here.
Right. Like putting up a fence or something.
Yeah, exactly. It's a boundary marker.
I like it. Okay, so what about that third mistake? The one where people forget to use the present perfect when they actually should be using it.
Right. That one can be a little trickier to spot.
It can be, yeah.
I think it happens when people get get so focused on the recent past, like what just happened,
Okay.
that they miss the bigger picture.
Okay.
They forget to think about how that past action is still connected to the present moment.
I see. I see.
Like they might say, I saw her this morning.
Right.
But if it's still the same day, it makes more sense to say, I've seen her today.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
today is still ongoing.
So it's all about the context, isn't it? Like, is the time period finished
It is. It's all about context.
or is it still happening?
Exactly. Is that action over and done with, or is it still casting a shadow on the present?
Love that. Love that. This is so helpful. I feel like we're really getting to the heart of how these tenses work.
I think so too. And you know what? Just talking about it like this,
Yeah.
it really helps me solidify my own understanding of these tenses.
Absolutely. Me too. Me too. It's like we're learning together. So we've talked about definitions, we've talked about examples, we've talked about mistakes. We've really like kind of dug into the nitty-gritty of these two tenses.
We have. We've gone deep.
Where do we go from here?
Well, I think we need to tie it all together, give our listeners a clear path to follow when they're trying to choose between these tenses.
All right, we're back for the final part of our deep dive into the past simple and present perfect tenses. I gotta say, I'm feeling pretty confident about my grammar skills now. How about you?
Definitely feeling more like a grammar guru. We've covered so much ground,
Well,
definitions, examples, the sneaky mistakes, even the thinking behind those mistakes. I think we're ready to wrap it all up and give our listeners a clear plan for choosing the right tense, every single time.
a grammar game plan. I love it. So where do we start?
Okay, so let's picture a decision tree. Like you come to a fork in the road
Okay.
and you got to decide which way to go. So the first question you got to ask yourself is the action over? Is it finished, done, complete?
Okay, so if I'm talking about something like I ate lunch at noon,
Perfect example.
that's past simple. Right?
Exactly. The action's done. You know exactly when it happened. Past simple all the way.
Action completed, specific time. Boom.
Boom.
Gotcha. Okay, but now what if the action is over, but you don't know when it happened? Or maybe the exact time just isn't important.
Okay.
Like, I've tried skydiving.
Okay.
It's more about the experience itself.
So in those cases, you want to think about the present perfect, especially if that action still has some connection to the present moment.
It's still part of who I am, part of my story.
Exactly.
Okay.
Now, what if the action isn't finished at all? What if it's something that's still going on?
Well, it sounds like we're moving into different tense territory, right?
We're talking about tenses like the present continuous
Sure.
or the present perfect continuous.
A whole other deep dive for another day.
Exactly. But for now, let's stick to our past simple and present perfect.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah.
Any other words of wisdom before we wrap things up?
Let me think. Remember those time expressions we talked about?
Yeah, those little helpers.
They're like your secret weapon in the grammar game. Words like yesterday, last week, in 2020.
Okay.
Those are like big flashing signs pointing you toward past simple. But if you see for, since, already, never, those are usually clues that you're dealing with present perfect.
It's like they're whispering the answers to us.
They are. They're your little grammar buddies.
I love it. All right, so before we say goodbye, let's clear up one last point of confusion that I know comes up a lot.
Okay.
The difference between I have been and I went.
Oh, yes. A classic grammar dilemma.
Yeah.
So I have been really emphasizes the experience of being somewhere. It's about having had that experience.
Okay.
But I went focuses on a specific trip, a specific event in the past. So, for example, I have been to Italy.
Okay.
That just means you've visited Italy at some point in your life. We don't know when exactly, but I went to Italy last summer. Now, that's talking about a particular trip.
So I have been is the experience and I went is the specific event.
You got it. And with that, I think we've covered just about everything you need to know to master the past simple and present perfect.
Wow. This has been such an incredible deep dive. I feel like we've not only learned a ton, but we've also kind of uncovered like a new appreciation for language itself.
I agree. And the best part is, this is just the beginning. The more you pay attention to how these tenses work in real conversations, the more confident you'll become in using them correctly.
Absolutely. It's all about practice, right?
Practice makes perfect.
So, as you go out into the world, armed with your newfound grammar knowledge, I want you to think about a recent experience you want to share. Would you use past simple or present perfect to describe it? And why? Keep practicing, stay curious, and remember, The world of grammar is full of fascinating discoveries. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.